Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Alex Nizick.
I'm Gabe Schenhauer.
So today we're going to talk mostly about the all-new 2023 Nissan Ariya, which these are our first impressions of this vehicle that we rented from Nissan. And this is a big deal because it's Nissan's first ever all-electric SUV to be sold in the U.S. And it's a two-row, five-passenger compact SUV along, similar in size to the Nissan Rogue. And just an upfront, I mentioned that we rented it. And for those of you that don't know how Consumer Reports does things, we do it a little different than a lot of the magazines, websites that evaluate and test cars, which is that while we do rent the vehicles from the automaker's press fleet to do a first drive, we won't test the one that we drove. We will wait until we buy a test vehicle. And that's unlike just about everybody else. We go out to the dealers just like you folks do, and we buy the vehicles. If we don't buy it, we don't test it, right? It's as simple as that, right, Gabe?
Yeah, that's for the formal testing, which means empirical measurements, instrumented road test, and the whole 9 yards.
Yep. Right. So for this, Nissan says front-wheel drive models of the Ariya are scheduled. Am I saying that right? Ariya? Is that how?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, just like the Opera.
Okay. Front-wheel drive models scheduled to start hitting dealers at the end of the year, with the all-wheel drive versions coming in early 23 is what they're saying right now. Of course, keep in mind things are, with the supply chain issues, you never know what's going to happen. So pricing starts at $43,190 for the front-wheel drive models, $47,190 for the all-wheel drive models. We rented a top trim Premier front-wheel drive with the extended range battery for this evaluation. And the pricing for the Premier starts at $54,690. But before we get too much into what it's like to drive the Ariya, Gabe, talk to us a little bit about Nissan's history with EVs, because, they were one of the first automakers to have a full-blown electric vehicle, right?
Yeah, as we all know, the Nissan Leaf was the first readily commercially available electric vehicle from an established car company. And that was in 2011, which really seems like eons ago, because the car had a very short range, and it was a hatchback as opposed to sexy-looking EVs that we have now. But that was also a way for Nissan to kind of bypass Toyota, which had a lock on the hybrid technology. So Nissan kind of came behind with an attempt of overshadowing Toyota a little bit.
But now what has happened in the meantime? Because, they come out, they're one of the very first. But Alex, there's been, the Leaf kind of, never really progressed that far. Right. Even the second generation seemed behind the times with its driving range. And they still only had one model, whereas we're seeing other, automakers now with multiple models out. Why do you think, Alex, Nissan kind of was early and then just kind of went nowhere?
Yeah, so it's, I think, as simple as the fact that the Leaf was something new when it came out, completely not available anywhere else, like Gabe talked about, right? And now the Ariya, which we'll talk about as we go through here, but while it's nice and competitive in a lot of ways, it's not really anything different or, bringing anything new to the table that you can't necessarily get anywhere else. So I think there was that allure and that kind of initial attraction of the fact that the Leaf was just completely, its own thing. Whereas that's not really true about the Ariya. And I also think that the Ariya has been delayed twice already. And it's unfortunate. I'm not placing blame or anything, but, this was originally supposed to come out mid 2021, and, we're going on 2023 here. And still, we're just kind of starting to see it show up for the first time and trickle out in certain versions, but it's not completely available. And just there's a lot of things have changed since not only the Leaf came out, but even in those 2 short years that it was originally supposed to come, there's been a lot of competitors. So I think they have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, for sure. So Gabe, tell us what we need to know mechanically about the Ariya. Like, what are we talking about in terms of horsepower, in terms of driving range, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so as you said, the it spans a really broad price spectrum from 43,000 to 60,000, and battery sizes are also, there are two types. There is a 63 kilowatt hour battery and an 87 kilowatt hour battery for the larger one. So both range and horsepower are also span quite a range. There are front wheel drive versions which go on sale as we speak, and all-wheel drive versions go on sale in early 2023. So, I mean, all in all, there are about 9 versions of the Ariya, which is kind of confusing. But compared to other EVs, it seems like the Ariya is kind of like, it's a solid competitive entry, but some of the EV-specific parameters seem a little half-hearted. For instance, it has only a 7.2 kilowatt onboard charger, which means you're going to be charging at home at 20 miles of range per hour instead of 35 miles of range per hour, which you would get with the Korean EVs and the German ones and some of the ones from General Motors and Ford. And that makes a difference. Also, in DC fast public charging places, the maximum acceptance rate is only 130 kilowatt, whereas Hyundai, Kia, Genesis will give you 235 kilowatt of max power. So a more competitive rate is around 200. So in those areas, Nissan is playing it either a little safe or it's just simply behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, and I wonder if partly a lot of that stems from, like you said, Alex, that this vehicle was delayed several times. Maybe if it came out when they originally wanted it to come out, it wouldn't have seemed kind of a little bit behind. But with that, I know you guys have kind of already spoiled it a little bit, that we're not super thrilled with this as an overall vehicle, but let's get into it. And Alex, let's start with, what's it like to drive this thing out on the road? Forget, what it says on paper, but what's it like out on the road?
Yeah, I don't want to say I don't like the Ariya. I do think it's competitive in a lot of ways, and significant ways in terms of the driving experience. I do actually think that it's quite competitive in terms of ride and handling and some of these things. Seems to have a little bit of like a kind of lighter on its feet type of feeling compared to something like an Ioniq 5 or an ID.4, some of these other similarly sized electric crossovers. So, and I think maybe part of that is it does have a shorter wheelbase than some of these cars, especially the Ioniq 5, where it's really long. It's like 118 inches, and this is more like 109. So quite a bit smaller in that regard. So you just get some quicker turn in, things like that. The steering is pretty light, which helps it feel kind of a little more eager. That being said, when we did meet with their engineers, they did talk about some of the changes they had to make compared to the Rogue, which this is similar to in a lot of ways. And with the Rogue, they kind of have this like hard mounted front subframe and just this really kind of stiff feeling steering, and it turns in really good. And a little bit less of that here, but so maybe a little less direct, but still quite nice. And actually, when we got it out on the track, I was pretty surprised. Not that you would ever really take your Ariya to a track, but just getting out there and getting to explore the limits a little bit, it kind of came alive. And we saw that with the Rogue and the Pathfinder. Those are kind of just, they drive well, but they're a little regular out on the road. But then we got them on our track and they kind of have this nice rotation and off throttle. They like to, the back end comes around a little bit. And this Ariya did the same thing. So I guess you could say it has some of that Nissan DNA that we've been seeing.
Alex,
Yep.
I thought that our producer Dave Abrams had talked to you about like giving a little warning. I'm going to nerd out here and start talking about subframes. Did you not remember when he's?
Yeah, he said all subframe talk is no problem.
Just kidding. But now the one thing, no, I noticed many things about the Ariya, but one thing, Alex, was it has 238 horsepower. These front wheel drive.
This front wheel drive version. Yeah, it depends on the battery and yeah.
Okay, so this one has 238 horsepower, but it's got some of that EV-ness that we like. But if you really like the thrill that we've kind of become accustomed to with EVs, which is they give you all of the torque immediately.
Right. Yeah.
This one, it feels a little timid compared to some. And did you notice that as well, or
a little bit? Yeah. I mean, 238 horsepower is good, and it felt powerful enough. But yeah, compared to some of these other EVs, especially all-wheel drive EVs, where you have that torque and you also have a ton of grip right away.
Right.
Yeah, it does feel a little more mild than that. I will say, though, I was impressed with the traction control tuning for a front-wheel drive EV compared to some of the others we've driven, like the Bolt, the Chevy Bolt, and the Toyota BZ4X, also front-wheel drive EVs, that we found it really, really easy to spin the tires, particularly if you're making like a left-hand turn out into traffic and you kind of need to merge really quickly. You'll end up kind of spinning those tires. And I just thought they did a good job here of, it's got the power to do that, but they've tuned the traction control nicely where they cut down on the wheel spin, but it doesn't feel like it's just robbing you of all the power. So I thought that was really nice. The only other thing that was missing here for me is the lack of a true one-pedal driving mode.
You don't even like one-pedal driving.
I'm not a huge fan, but I know a lot of people are, and it's not about me, Monty. And I know you really like one pedal.
I do like one pedal.
This is for you. Yeah. But I do think if you are kind of, and maybe you've never driven an EV before, but if you are a fan of one pedal driving, this might not really be the EV for you.
Well, and so for those of you that don't know what one pedal driving is, it's basically, regenerative braking, but a really strong version where when you let off the accelerator pedal, I keep wanting to call it a gas pedal, but it's electric. When you let off the accelerator pedal, it immediately starts slowing the car down. Mm-hmm. And if it has a true one pedal driving brake regeneration system, it's going to be strong enough in the way it slows the car down that you wouldn't even need to touch the brake pedel.
Right.
And
it'll bring you to a complete stop.
Right. But this one doesn't do that. It has something called E-Step, which Nissan has in the Leaf as well, which is a pretty strong version of regenerative braking, but it doesn't bring you to a complete stop. So you've got two things. Right. If you don't have E-Step on, the brake pedal's a little bit spongy, but a lot of EVs are like that. Mm-hmm. If you have E-Step on, it does this eerie thing that we noticed with the Mercedes-Benz EQS, where when it does its brake regeneration, the brake pedal physically goes in, which is very disconcerting. But you're going to have to use. It's one thing if you're doing one pedal driving and you don't need to hit the brake pedal, but you will always have to hit the brake pedal to come to a complete stop. So now you go to hit the brake pedal. The brake pedal's in much further than you expected, and it feels very wooden. So that was kind of annoying. And Gabe, I mean, did it bother you as well? I know you're also not a huge one pedal driving kind of guy, but what did you think about that kind of weird brake pedal moving on its own thing?
Well, there is one pedal driving and there is one pedal driving. I like it in a Ford F-150 Lightning. I like it in a Lucid Air. Cars that have it well sorted out, regenerative braking and one pedal drive are fine. But the E pedal in the Ariya, I couldn't stand it. I mean, I had it on for about 3 minutes, and it was so aggressive. The deceleration felt so pronounced, and luckily I didn't have any passengers with me because they'd be throwing up. I can tell you.
Gabe, this is a family show. Come on, keep it clean. Keep it clean.
Yeah, so I couldn't stand it. I turned it off, and the pedal itself was okay. I mean, it had a little bit of that mushiness, but it wasn't too hard to get used to.
Yeah. So let's move on to the interior real quick. And just off the top, for me anyway, just the basic stuff. The front seats work really well for me. I think they're really well bolstered. Again, this is the top trim, so we don't know what the lower trims are going to have. But these seats worked really well for me in terms of good bolstering on both the seat back and the bottom cushion. And I love the grippy suede material that these seats have. The rear seat also, I thought, was pretty comfortable and has plenty of headroom. If I had a kind of a fault, and also good toe space under the front seats, which we're not seeing in a lot of vehicles these days, I thought there could have been a little better. Maybe if they raked the bottom cushion back a little more, it would have a little bit better leg support. But overall, I thought pretty good.
Yeah.
The driving position. Now that's kind of interesting because it has this power operated center console, which I certainly don't remember seeing anytime recently, which is kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool in a way. I know maybe Alex and Gabe may not be, but I'll say this. First of all, I think it's kind of neat because I do adjust my driving position throughout a trip, right? Now, in the end, it turns out I would power it all the way forwards is the way I kind of really wanted it anyway. And even with that, I still didn't have any center console intrusion with my right knee, which, was always bothersome. And I didn't have that here. But what I didn't like was that the door armrest is like on a totally different plane.
I like this.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was so low compared to the center armrest that, I mean, it was basically unusable for me. And the other thing I had is the way the instrument cluster is and the steering wheel, I needed to have the steering wheel up higher, kind of more bus-like, which is something we've been seeing on more and more cars lately. It's like, because otherwise, if you have it down where you want it, or where some of us want it, it's going to cut off the top of the instrument cluster.
Yeah, that's quickly becoming a pet peeve of mine. I feel like almost all of these cars that have a large rectangular screen for their gauge cluster, this is happening, and it's pretty frustrating. Depending on what gets cut off, sometimes it's just like graphics or something, but other times it's critical symbols and information. Some cars speed. I kind of want to know that.
Now, Gabe, let's talk about the controls as well, because I mean, on the one hand, it's kind of neat when you look at it, and it's got this kind of minimalistic, what I would call, I guess, a center stack, the way that the some of the climate controls are on this, kind of wood panel, right? And they're what we call capacitive touch capacitive. Basically, they aren't physical buttons, but at the same time, they don't have all of the climate controls there. So they have some, but then you still need to go into the touch screen to do like seat heaters or to adjust airflow mode. Gabe, what's your overall impression on kind of what they did with these controls?
Yeah, first, before I forget, I'd like to say that I like the power slidable.
So it's 2-1. It's 2-1. Me and Gabe win.
I just don't know why it needed to be a giant electronic contraption. Why couldn't it just been like the sliding, manual armrest like in some of the cars?
Because when it breaks down the road, it'll be fun to see where it ends up.
In the one position that you set it in and never changed it from. That's where it'll
we've
be.
seen manual.
Fair point.
We've seen the manual version of it in some minivans years ago.
Right.
But anyway, that's besides the point. We want to talk about controls, right?
Yes.
So I kind of like the row of buttons that are kind of integrated with that matte wood strip right in front of you. I think they're easy to see and easy to hit when you need something. But yeah, the haptic or capacitive touch just doesn't give you the right kind of feedback and doesn't give you the and nothing is really protruding, so you can't really reach and grab something while you're driving without really looking and deciphering exactly where you want your finger to be. Other than that, deeper interactions through the touchscreen which is a little far away, is not really ideal. I mean, I certainly like some hard buttons, particularly for volume and on/off and temperature adjustment. So, in my short drive, I just remember that I couldn't find a lot of the things that I wanted and didn't really dive in and didn't really like take the car, live with it like day and night to really have a good sense of it. But we'll know more once we get our own.
Alex, I know you're a big controls evaluator for us. What did you think of that?
He's a control freak.
He's a control freak. He totally is.
Totally. That might be true. I'm learning that now.
Ask his wife. I don't know. I've not
turn the volume down on my computer here. Yeah, so I guess my take here is they say when we met with them that they're really going for mainstream with this. Like, every Nissan vehicle outside of, I guess, the GTR is going for mainstream. But the controls kind of feel like a huge departure from where they are with, the Rogue and the Pathfinder, for example, where you're mostly hard button based. You do have an infotainment system, but almost everything is redundant. And that infotainment system is really easy to use. So I agree. The touch capacitive controls are really beautiful and like a manufacturing feat just to look at them. But the fact that I have to go in to do the heated seats in the touchscreen specifically it's not only that they're in there, but also the way they chose to design that interface is really confusing and frustrating. So I think, if they're going to put them in there, they got to at least make them easy to use. The other thing, and Gabe, it jogged my memory when Gabe talked about driving it at night, the backlighting of all the controls is a really nuanced thing, but you usually never have a problem with it. But for some reason, the backlighting behind all the buttons at nighttime was just so super dim. You couldn't see them at all unless you turned it all the way up until it's like blinding. But one click down and they were just like total blackout. You can't see them at all. Hoping that's a pre-production. This is a pre-production model that we drove, so I'm hoping it's that. But yeah, so just some stuff like that was kind of, details that were off the mark a little bit for me. But I think the other thing that we should mention is the motorized center console, or not the console, the like panel underneath the touchscreen that like comes out, that little storage console. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but it's found it to be a little silly.
So it's like a jewelry box.
And Gabe wears a lot of jewelry.
That's right. He's been known to. I feel like all these EVs, they're trying to give you something to do while you're charging. Like Teslas, you have like a web browser. Some of the Fords, you can play games. Hyundai, you can recline the seat. So they told us that it's a table. And when you extend it out, it's got this like flat surface. But it's also very, very small. So I'm not really sure the point of it. It just felt like a little...
I didn't understand it. I didn't understand what I was supposed to do with it, to be totally honest with you. I really didn't. So we'll fiddle more with that, folks, when we get our own. Gabe, you mentioned this, and I just want to... Would you elaborate a little more on the inordinate amount of trim levels that this vehicle is available in? Just touch on it real quick and tell us whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing for consumers.
Well, the bad thing is it's way too confusing. 9 trim lines, and everyone has a plus somewhere and a 4 somewhere else, and words like force and
evolve
and whatnot. It's really hard to keep track of, but the good news is that it gives you a variety of choices. And it gives customers a wide price span, so you can probably find what you want, or you can also outfit it to be a pretty luxurious vehicle, particularly in platinum. And we should also mention that there are only 2 trim lines where you can get the ProPilot 2.0, which is the next phase after ProPilot Assist. And the difference here is that it gives you a direct driver monitor system. It also has the ability to be a true level 2 semi-automated system that allows some hands-free driving. And it has a lane change feature that the car will perform a lane change on its own if the camera has determined that everything is clear and you use your turn signal. Very much like what Tesla does and the top versions of BMW and Mercedes do.
So what I'm hearing there is, on the bright side, direct driver monitoring, infrared camera, which we like. Maybe not so good is the fact that we're going to have to buy a higher trim, it looks like, to get that than we would normally purchase, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's wrap this up. Alex, just initial impressions. Where do you think the Ariya stacks up against its other EV competitors?
Yeah, I think, like we talked about, I think it's competitive in terms of its driving dynamics, its ride comfort, handling, that sort of thing. Its power, at least for this front wheel drive version, and what it's able to deliver on that front. We'll wait to see what the all wheel drive is like. I think where it's kind of unique in some ways to what Gabe talked about is how much choice you have. As confusing as the trim names and all that stuff is, it is unique that they give you so many options. I mean, I think this is the only EV that's giving you 2 battery sizes, and you can get all-wheel drive with the smaller battery pack. I don't know who that customer is, but they're giving you that option, so that's there. That being said, it's more expensive than the Ioniq 5 and the ID.4, and I don't really know if you're getting anything for that extra cost. It just doesn't have anything that stands out to me as unique or, groundbreaking. I mean, I think the the hands-free driving system that Gabe mentioned, that ProPilot Assist 2.0, that's something new. That's new for Nissan, but they're not the only ones with a system like that. So some of those things, the questionable controls, and then maybe the, just average charging characteristics kind of make me question, if this was a lot cheaper than some of the others, then, my tone would be a lot different. But I think as it stands, it kind of just falls somewhere in the playing field. It doesn't really rise above.
All right, Gabe, take us home. What's your initial final opinion on this right now?
Look, as I said, it's a very pleasant SUV, competitive, and in terms of electric drive, I think it's going to satisfy a lot of people. If you're someone who just charges overnight and you don't care if your car is gaining 20 or 35 miles of range per hour, then it's probably not going to matter to you. And if you look at the future, then you want to be a little future proof. And it seems like the thinking behind the Ariya wasn't so future proof here. So the Nissan may be able to give you some improvements over time, but as it stands right now, it seems a little. It doesn't seem as enthusiastic about some of the EV aspects of the vehicle.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so we have more information on the 2023 Ariya up on our website, consumerreports.org. So please go there and check that out. As we said, we'll be buying an all-wheel drive version as soon as they are available in early 2023. So stay tuned for our full road test results on that as soon as we get it. And now let's move on to our audience question of the week segment. And just a quick reminder for those of you, the best way to reach us is to send a question, comment, 30-second video clips to talkingcars@icloud.com. And, we do mention that we love the video clips because we really enjoy seeing, your smiling faces and often the cool cars and backgrounds that you have for us. So keep those coming. And wouldn't you know it, we have one of those today. So let's run that clip.
Hey, Talking Cars. I'm a huge fan. I've actually sent in a question before, which you guys answered, which was super helpful. Just not on the air. I'm hoping this one gets on the air. I'm from just outside of Boston, and I've just pulled into my garage in the rain in my Chevy Bolt EUV, which is awesome. I love the vehicle. And it made me think of something. The camera was like totally worthless, covered in droplets of water. And it seems like Volkswagen's the only one who's done anything about this by hiding the camera behind the badge, and it pops out when you pop into reverse. And that way it's not just getting all gunked up the whole time that you're driving around. I don't understand why everyone hasn't done this. I don't think VW has a patent on it. Even Audis don't do it, and they're the same company. So I'm just wondering, what do you think about this? Do you see any reason why this can't be done? And maybe it's something CR could actually advocate for, since the backup cameras are also part of the safety equipment, and we don't want to be driving over something that we can't see because of water droplets. So maybe you have thoughts on it. Anyway, keep up the good work. Keep talking cars. Love the show. Thanks so much.
So, Gabe, Brian certainly brings up a good point about the way VW has its, backup camera with that, it's got that giant VW emblem and they're putting it to use, that it comes up. Why aren't other automakers doing something similar to that to keep that backup camera clean?
For the record, it's not only VW. BMW has it in the X2, and Mercedes has it in some other models, and even Buick had it in the models that were made by Opel, GM's previous German subsidiary, which they sold since then. And yeah, Audi doesn't have a round logo, so it's a little hard to for Audi to do this. I mean, maybe Audi should change their logo to, instead of 4 circles side by side, to 4 circles stacked on top of each other. Then they can
and
do
he's
it.
talking about the Chevy Bolt, right? EUV. That's what he has, and that's even worse. The bow tie. How are you going to make that into a circle, right? But
I guess you can, but it's probably expensive, and
that's the real reason.
But but I will say, though, that there are some other cars, like high-end Fords, for instance, have a jet that washes the lens. And I think the GM models that use the lens for the rear view mirror also has a jet that keeps the lens clean. And by the way, that lens has a certain coating that that prevents it from collecting too much dirt. But I actually made it a habit when I walk down the streets, I see I see a dirty lens, I just wipe it for somebody.
Wow, that's really nice.
He's a true citizen. We love you for that, Gabe.
I'm going to have to.
He's making other people's car alarms go off.
Don't worry, just cleaning your camera. Gets a little overwhelming when some of these cars have like 20 cameras on them. You just
You think it's mostly cost reasons, Alex? It's not.
That's
it's
my
not
guess.
Like a patent or anything like that, right?
I don't think so. That's my immediate gut reaction. It's more expensive to do that, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but VW historically has kind of had the hatch release under the handle as well, so they kind of already had like that flipping mechanism. I'm not saying definitely that they reused it or anything, but they kind of already had that idea. But to Gabe's point about the washers, I will say some of them seem to work better than others. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing. Some of them clean the camera really well, just like kind of a quick little jet of the washer fluid, and other ones you'll like hear the pump go and then nothing really happens. You got to try it a couple times. It's just a little flaky on some of those models. So there are options out there, but definitely agree that there should be something to keep the cameras clean, whether it's a logo, a washer, or just Gabe walking around.
Yeah, so we all need a little Gabe in our life. But I'm with Brian.
It's too bad the Bolt is too far away in Boston, so I can't just provide my services.
I mean, I'm with Brian on this one. It seems to me like it's such an ingenious thing that VW did. Like I said, they already were using that to open the hatch, and then they used it for their backup camera. And it seems like, honestly, it's a great way to keep them clean. So why not? But anyway, we'll see what happens down the road. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to learn more about the cars and the topics that we talked about, you can click on the links in the show notes. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips at talkingcars@icloud.com. This episode was produced by Dave Abrams and edited by Andrew Belize. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next week.